Hello, the video you're about to watch was made about a year and a half ago to 2 years. I make a statement at the beginning of the movie that nobody has a story like this one. Kind of what I mean by that statement in regards to, like nobody else knows, is I'm not really trying to convey that. I'm just saying that I kind of take that from reference of 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. Where it kind of says that we are changed into the same image of the Lord from glory to glory. In other words, as we learn and understand more about Christ, we become more like Him. And I've just discovered some things in Scripture in this film that I'm talking about that I've never heard anybody say before. That's kind of what I'm conveying there. So I'm just letting you know before we get started, so that you won't get offended right off the bat, maybe. So we'll start with the show. Here you go. Hello, my name is Rusty Jaggers. I've got a little message I would like to tell. I know everybody has a message, but not everybody's got a message quite like this one. There was a movie that came out back in 1980, I think it was, called The Gremlins, and at the beginning of that movie, that's kind of what the narrator said of this movie. He said, nobody's got a story like this one. I'd like to talk about the Bible a little bit and kind of bring us up to date on where man is kind of on the timeline. If you want to start at the beginning, scriptures that I'm going to use is in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, and it's right after the children of Israel had came out of Egypt. God had led them by the hand out of the land of Egypt, out of bondage. And all of this was due to the Pharaoh's forgetting about Joseph, which was the last son born to Jacob. And Jacob was the son of Isaac, and Isaac was the son of Abraham. But anyway, after the Pharaohs, after a while after Joseph had died, the Pharaohs forgot about Joseph and the good things that he'd done for Egypt, and they began to become jealous of the children of Israel. And they made slaves out of them, to kind of sum up what happened. And Moses was born to lead the children of Israel out of bondage. And at the point in this where this message begins is when Moses and the 10 plagues had already been put upon the land of Egypt, and Pharaoh which was Ramses, he finally said, "Let the people go." And they had come across the Red Sea already, and they were at the mountain of Sinai. And this is kind of like in that movie, The 10 Commandments, that Charlton Heston was in. And it's kind of at the point to where Moses has brought the children to the mountain of Sinai, and there's God is on top of the mountain, and there's this big cloud, and there's lightning and thunderings and trumpets. But anyway, God is getting ready to come down the mountain and present himself to the children of Israel after he had brought them out of bondage. And this is where we begin, and it begins in Exodus chapter 20, verse 18. And the first thing God did before these scriptures here is he spoke the 10 Commandments from the midst of the fire on top of the mountain. And then God is getting ready to come down the mountain and reveal himself to them. And in Exodus 20 and 18 it starts, "And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, Speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said unto the people, Fear not, for God is come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not." And sin, if you look in the book of 1 John in the New Testament, chapter 3, verse 4, sin is the transgression of the law. In other words, sin is the disobedience to the law that God had just spoke right before he was getting ready to come down the mountain. In Exodus 21 through 17. So God's fear was, God wanted to put his fear before their faces so that they would not, break his law, which is sin. And the people stood afar off anyway. And this is in Exodus 20 and 21. "And Moses drew near into the thick darkness where God was." Now, Moses was the only one that had enough sense to go to God at that time. The children of Israel were so afraid, and they didn't understand what was going on, and God had mercy on them at this time. But Moses was the only one that actually went to meet God. And in Matthew 13:11, when Christ came in the flesh, which Christ was on this mountain with God the Father at this time when he was coming down the mountain. And Matthew says this to his people of Israel when he came in the flesh. I'm going to click and read this to you. It's Matthew chapter 13 verse 11. And he answered and said unto them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even that he hath. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, by hearing ye shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see, and shall not perceive. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. And he's talking to his disciples right there. And then in verse 17 it says, for verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. And hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. And that's verse 18. So Moses, back in Exodus 20 and 21, Moses did what Jesus was speaking about here. Moses was the only one that had ears to hear what God had to say in the midst of the fire. And so Moses drew near into the thick darkness where God was. And so to sum it up, the children of Israel stood afar off when God was going to reveal himself to them. Let me click my camera back on again here. This was before the temple in the wilderness was constructed in Exodus 25 verses 8 and 9. This was before the Ark of the Covenant was built, the chest that was to carry the 10 Commandments that Moses got from God off the mountain when God wrote the commandments on stone after he spoke it. And this was later on. And this was before Aaron, Moses' brother, was ordained high priest in Exodus chapter 28. This was before the 10 Commandments that God spoke in Exodus 20, 1 through 17 were placed on stone tablets to be put in the ark. In other words, the ark was built to put the 10 Commandments in. And this happened in Exodus 32, verses 15 and 16, and the ark was built for this purpose, it says in Exodus 25, verses 16, and also in verse 21. Now this was before a king was appointed over Israel, which was Saul. But the prophet Samuel at that time warned the children of Israel that they didn't want a man to be their king, that they would be better off to let God be their king. But the children of Israel, again, they stood afar off, you might say, and they said, no, we want a man to rule over us. So God kind of, it hurt God's feelings there. You can read in 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 4 through 22. But God went ahead and allowed it to be so. And so King Saul was the first king over Israel. And this was before Jesus said when he came in the flesh. Now this was years later, like 1,200 years later. Now when Jesus came in the flesh, he said to the Pharisees to destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will rise it up, when he came to the Pharisees in John 2 and 19. So in other words, the temple, in which there was about 3 of them constructed by the time Christ came. There was the one in the wilderness that Moses and the children of Israel constructed, and then there was the temple of Solomon, and it was destroyed, and then there was the temple that Herod built for the Israel people prior to Christ's coming. And Jesus said, destroy this temple, which was the temple that King Herod had constructed at that time. but it was the third temple for the children of Israel.